All right, hello everybody. This is Lisa Kessler from Kessler Insurance, and we're talking to you today on behalf of Cheers for Charity New Hampshire. And we're talking to another fantastic organization. And first, I want to say hello to Joanne Burchuck. Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Lisa. So yes, I'm Joanne Burchuck with Lighthouse Physical Therapy, and I'm very interested in our next guest, Marsha, and she is with the Hospice Help Foundation. I had to practice that a few times because it's a big word, but anyway, I'm very excited to hear what your foundation does and how you serve the community members. So please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit what your foundation does.
Well, thank you, Joanne, and thank you, Lisa, so much for this opportunity to talk about our work and the people we help. You know, we are a small organization here in Portsmouth, but we partner up with hospices throughout the state and even further afield in order to provide their patients who are struggling with poverty to be able to afford essentials that boost their comfort and dignity in their final days, weeks, and months of life. Last year, we helped about 100 patients and their families with everything from rent and utilities to modest last wishes. We helped one music lover get a visit from the king of rock and roll himself. And you'd be amazed at how affordable Elvis impersonators actually are. And it was just, you know, a wonderful, obviously pre-COVID, meaningful moment for that patient. So before I go on and talk about our work, I wanted to just take a minute, because not everybody knows what hospice is really. So I just wanted to take a minute to put people in the shoes of some of the people that we help. So imagine that you've been diagnosed with a terminal disease. Your doctor has given you 6 months or less left to live. And he has said, or she has said, there's really nothing else we can do for you at this stage. So people generally have 2 options at that point. The first would be to continue trying anything to beat the disease, you know, and that can be, you know, extra rounds of chemotherapy. It could be an experimental treatment. You know, there are lots of options, and many people choose that path, but it does often lead to people being hospitalized and spending most of their final days, you know, hooked up to medical equipment and not really being able to enjoy their remaining days. So that's where hospice comes in. So hospice is for people who really want to focus on the quality of their life rather than finding a cure for their disease. And a team of people are assigned to you, and that includes everything from a social worker to a nurse to even a chaplain if you want one. And they often have volunteers come in as well. And they will support patients and their family members to help people, you know, come to terms with mortality, to, you know, tie up loose ends and say goodbye to friends, and, you know, to help them really maximize the remaining time alive. And then when the patient finally passes, they also help the family members with bereavement support, which can be, you know, which can really make a big difference. So, you know, the ultimate goal of hospice is to help people make the most of their final days. And that's wonderful. But imagine trying to make the most of your final days when you're facing an eviction, or you have to make decisions like putting food on the table or heating your home. You know, we have patients who literally have no clothes but the hospital gown that they, you know, were entered into the nursing home with. So that's where we come in, really. You know, we make sure that they can spend their days in dignity and in comfort and as well connected to their friends and family as is safe and as possible. So yeah, I mean, we also make sure that patients can have a dignified funeral if they're really, you know, struggling financially. We will cover, you know, a certain amount going towards the funeral or cremation expenses. But what we really want to do is make sure that the funds, you know, improve the quality of life of the patient and their loved ones. So say many of the people that we've helped have been on, sort of living on the sidelines or living from one paycheck to the next for years, whether it's because of addiction or chronic poverty or mental illness. But many others, too many in my opinion, are people just like you and I, or anyone that you see on the street who has, through their illness, just been socked with medical bills that have wiped out their savings. And then, what happens when your car breaks down or your boiler breaks down? Like they're just unable to cope with that unexpected extra payment. And we also help with those. So I wanted to just share a few pictures, and this will look very sort of low tech, but I thought, it's always helpful to just show some of the people that we've helped and tell their stories. And, I'm always struck. So I vet all the requests and then I circulate them to our board of directors, and they come to us from the social workers themselves. I'm always struck by how humble these requests can be. And these stories will give an example of that. So this is Charlie. He was a veteran, and he was due to move into a nursing home. And he, was scraping by, from month to month, but he didn't have the funds to bring his beloved pet up to date on their shots, so that, I think the cat's name was Barry, so that he could move into the nursing home with him. Mm-hmm. So we funded that for the tune of, I think, $190. And it meant that, this old couple could be together right to the end. And we learned later on that the cat was adopted by one of the nurses at the nursing home, and so moved on to another happy family.
Aww.
Which is sort of sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then this is Joan. And she simply wanted to stay in her home. She was living with her partner in an old farmhouse that was sort of falling down around them. And they had 2 pickup trucks that were held together with duct tape, the social worker said. They had been together alone for years because their families had disowned them because of their lifestyle choice. They were partners. And they just wanted, they couldn't afford to fill their oil tank to stay warm through the winter. And, that's one of the requirements. If you're going to stay home, you have to have working heat. And so we put in about $325 worth to fill their tank so that they could stay warm, stay together in their home.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then this is one last one, and then I'll stop.
No, this is great.
Oh, good. This is Carly, and she's 12 years old. I don't know if you can see in the picture, is pretty low res, but she was in a wheelchair. She was living with her mother, and she wanted to go to school to attend field day one last time. But her mother found it really difficult to help Carly in and out of that wheelchair and, bring it in and out of the house and into the car. And so we funded a ramp so that Carly could still get around. She was able to go outside and enjoy the last of, a lot of the summer. And this is a picture of her at that field day. And I just love her big grin. Yeah.
Oh, that is so lovely. Those are special to just see, the people that you're helping. And like you said, just the very small requests sometimes that people have that just make all the difference in the world. Now, if somebody needed help and services, how do you determine qualifications for, someone to receive money or funding or anything?
Yeah, that's a great request. So we are a little bit vague on that because we know that everybody has a different story. So, most of the people who apply for our support are making less than $1,500 a month. And it's usually, Social Security income, primarily, that is the income that they're receiving. So they are, around poverty level, roughly, but we don't put any specific parameters on it because we know, there are many people who, because of private health insurance, it wipes them out. They have nothing left. We've helped people be able to afford Meals on Wheels who had private insurance. And the same thing with mortgages. Someone can have a huge mortgage payment, and that can just mean that they can't afford anything else. And the last thing we want is for someone to, during this time when every moment is precious, we definitely don't want them to have to worry about like relocating and being away from all the surroundings, the things that bring them comfort and joy and have through their life. I mean, nursing homes are good for some people in certain situations, but the majority of people want to die in the comfort of their home, and we do what we can, especially now with the pandemic, to make sure that that can happen.
Yeah. And so you have people that go into people's homes too, right? As part of the hospice program. How have you had to shift what you guys do because of COVID and the restrictions out there?
Yeah, that's another great question. So we are a staff of one. I keep saying we, but it's me. But we partner up with hospices throughout the state, and the social workers essentially and primarily are our boots on the ground. So like we'll have a hospice in Rochester, and they will tell me about one of their patients who is struggling financially. So they're the ones who are regularly going into patients' homes and looking around, and a lot of people don't volunteer that they're struggling financially, so it takes the astuteness of social workers and other hospice staff to notice it, and then maybe bring up this really uncomfortable discussion about their financial situation, and then they will apply on behalf of their patients. And that definitely has been very challenging with COVID-19 because, with nursing homes especially, but also in people's private homes, I'm certainly reluctant to have visitors, and they are as well. Hospice patients are extremely at risk to the disease. They usually have comorbidities, they're frail, they're at end of life. The majority of hospice patients are senior citizens. So, their family members want to protect them. And for much of this year have said, we're keeping visitors to a minimum, and that might mean the hospice nurse or medical director, but it won't mean the social workers. So it's been really difficult to identify patients, but, they've been coming in, and, we have been growing by 25 to 30% each year. And this is partly because, the population in New Hampshire is aging pretty rapidly and pretty steadily. So, we are growing in order to meet that need. But we also know that, things have been quiet. Certainly March and April, I think everyone was sort of hunkered down and trying to figure out what the heck was going to happen next. And now that it seems like this is the new normal, we are seeing requests come in. And definitely once the moratorium on evictions and shutoffs is lifted and that state of emergency is lifted, we know that we're going to see, months of rent being requested of us, particularly now that people aren't working. A lot of jobs have been lost, and they're not coming back anytime soon.
Marcia, just a quick question on that. Do you have like a maximum amount that you give? Some nonprofits, they'll give up to $500, or maybe they'll give up to $300 or whatever the number is, and they'll partner with another group, like a Oyster of a Women Aid or an Annie's Angels or something like that. How does that work for you all?
Yes, we love partnering up with other organizations. Like Women Aid has been great. And a lot of hospices often have their own foundation that provides some limited support as well. And we love to be able to work in conjunction with them to be able to, set their patients on really stable footing so they don't have to worry at all about, the bills that are coming in and unpaid balances. We are, because of COVID, normally I would say at most our grants were for about $1,500, but we did just approve one for $3,000. And it was interesting. That was for an extermination where the bed bugs were just horrific. And the patient was was not a hoarder, but had hoarding tendencies. And so the exterminator said, you know, this is going to be a big job. But I mean, I really am happy to fund those because can you imagine being on hospice and having bed bugs? Just what an awful situation that must be. My heart goes out to the patients, but also to the hospice staff who have to go into that home and risk bringing those bed bugs back with them to their own homes. So we are happy to fund that request. That was a big one for us. But to date, we have never had to decline a request because of lack of funding, and we have no intention of doing that anytime soon. Okay. And I just want to say, like, we have been so moved by the outpouring of support from donors and local foundations that have really stepped up to make sure that we can continue to support vulnerable patients during this time.
That was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you is how are you funded through all of this? It sounds like it's all through private donations and perhaps some big fundraisers that may or may not have happened this year.
Yes, absolutely. Normally I say that we are not state, we receive no state or federal funding, but this year we did get some funding from the state of New Hampshire, and that will really help with our fall event, which is not going to happen. It will be postponed until next year, hopefully at some point, depending on how things turn out. And usually the majority of money that comes in is through memorial donations. So it's people who have made a donation on behalf of a loved one, because of the wonderful job that the hospice team has done. And so it's sort of in their honor.
That's fantastic. Well, Marcia, this has been really interesting and so informative. If people want to learn more, either because they know somebody who is, maybe a candidate for your services, or maybe they'd like to volunteer or donate because they felt touched by this conversation, what's the best way to get more information about your organization?
Great. Well, they can give me a call on my cell phone, because that's where I'm working right now, is right at home. So my phone number is 603-205-0362. And then they can also learn more about the organization at hhelpfoundation.org. So that's HHELP Foundation. That's all one word, .org.
Fantastic. Well, this has been awesome. I loved those stories. I really just so grateful for the work that you do, and the impact you're making on people in our community. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity, and kudos to you as well for being an important part of the force for good in our community. So thank you.
Thanks so much, and we look forward to we look forward to staying in touch.
Great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.